She explained to Piper that a lot of the kids at this camp had dyslexia or ADHD, or both. Lots of them have been switched to a lot of different schools, and others just run away from home. And lots of them had bad relationships even with their mortal parents. And most important of all, the kids here were all children of ancient Greek gods. However weird all of that sounded, Piper wasn't weirded out at all. In fact, it might have explained all the other weird things in her life. Why her mom left right after she was born, and why no one, not even her dad, had ever seemed to be able to remember her, or even her name. And why they didn't have any pictures of her. Not to mention why she had been having some weird dreams recently. But Piper didn't mention any of that to Annabeth. Instead, she decided to tell her about how she'd been struggling to get her dad's attention, how she'd been kicked out of a bunch of schools and results. She even pushed her limits by stealing a car once. "Well, not exactly steal," she said. "You see, I actually literally asked the dealer guy if I could just borrow it, and he just said yes, just like that. And then he must have realized what he'd done, because as soon as I got it, that's when the police came after me. Next thing you know, I'm in the wilderness school." That is strange," Annabeth said. "That makes you sound like a Hermes kid, but then again, you said your dad's the mortal." Then she asked Annabeth about her boyfriend, Percy. "It was just a few nights ago. After the campfire, we were saying goodnight, as usual. He gave me a goodnight kiss before we watched each other go off into our cabins. And then, the next morning, he was just gone. No one knew where he went, not even his mother. No one could find him. We sent out a few search parties. Our friend Grover is leading a group of satyrs, and his brother Tyson is searching the seas with his dog. The Hunters of Artemis were kind enough to help too. I was so sure we were going to spend our first Christmas together." "How long have you two been dating?" Piper asked. "Since August," Annabeth answered. "Whoa, no way! Almost the same time I met Jason," Piper said. "But for us it's only been a few weeks, and now since the field trip, he acts like he doesn't even know me." "Piper, that's because of the mist," Annabeth said. "Mist? Mist what?" "You see, the mist is a powerful force created to hide the monster activities and godly activities from the mortals. It could disguise monsters to look human, and even manipulate people's minds and change their memories to think that something else happened or something never happened. Since the mist could hide things, it could also hallucinate mortals to think Camp Half-Blood doesn't exist. Say if mortals would drive past the camp down the road or fly over it, the mist would just keep them from seeing it as if it weren't even there. It could also make anyone think a particular person has always been around or was never around. Sometimes it depends on whoever's controlling it. And sometimes it could be strong enough to even work on demigods, like us." "But Jason is real," Piper said. "I remember. I liked him the first week we met. He liked me for me. He took me to see the fireworks. We held hands. We kissed. We did have something." "Did you ever notice his marks before today?" Annabeth asked. "Did he ever mention where he came from? Do you remember him talking about his parents, or his old school, or old friends? What's his last name?" Piper stood frozen. Did she know Jason's last name? She felt like he must have told her at least once, or maybe she heard it once during the school year. She tried to think hard, but the memory just wasn't there. Piper felt like crying. She couldn't believe the one thing that made her so happy after such a long time was a lie. "You'll betray them for us or lose everything," said a voice in her head. It was that same voice from a dream she had about 3 nights ago, and it had been haunting her since, and she told no one about it. It was just too much. Why did every little thing that was so good in her stupid, miserable life have to be taken away? "You brought me over here so no one would see me get emotional, didn't you?" Piper guessed. Annabeth nodded. "I know what it's like to lose someone you care about. But it'll be okay. We'll figure it out. Jason's here now. And he seems like a nice guy. Who knows? And it hasn't been all that long. Maybe you guys can have a fresh start. Not likely, Piper thought. Not if the dream had told her the truth, but she couldn't say that. But still, I don't understand. If he really did show up just today, then why? How did he even get there? Why can't he remember anything? Who would do this to us? Good questions, Annabeth said. Hopefully, Carmen can figure that out. But for now, we need to get you settled in. On with the tour? She led Piper to a big metal shed that looked like it was meant for gardening tools. Every demigod needs a weapon, Annabeth said. Hephaestus makes the best, but we have a good selection too. Athena's all about strategy, matching the right weapon to the right person. Let's see what we can find. The inside was piled up with all sorts of weapons, from swords to spears and bows, etc. Piper didn't feel much like shopping for deadly objects, but she knew Annabeth was trying to do something nice for her. Annabeth handed her a massive sword which Piper could hardly lift. Now, they both said at once. Then, something in the corner caught Piper's eyes. What's that? She said. She picked up a tiny knife that looked like it hadn't seen the light of day in centuries. Oh, I don't know, Piper. Annabeth sounded uneasy. I don't think you want that one. Swords are usually better. You use a knife? Yeah, but... Annabeth struggled. Well, take a good look if you want. The dagger was tiny. It might have looked slightly smaller than Annabeth's. The metal was surprisingly reflective, like a mirror. Her reflection in the blade caught her by surprise. She looked older, more serious, not as scared as she felt. It suits you, Annabeth admitted. I like it, Piper said. Why didn't you think it was right for me? Well, Annabeth hesitated. The thing is, that particular blade, its original owner, well, her name was Helen. What? Piper exclaimed. Helen? As in Helen of Troy? The Helen of Troy? This was hers? And it's just sitting here in a shed? Shouldn't it be like in a museum or something? It's a powerful weapon, made of godly metal, capable of killing monsters, Annabeth explained. It still has plenty of potential after all this time. As demigods, it's very valuable to us. It's better to make some use of it than let it sit in a museum collecting dust and going to waste. Next to that, the dagger was just a wedding present from her first husband. She named the dagger Catoptress, meaning mirror, looking glass. Probably because that's the only thing Helen ever used it for. I don't think it's ever seen battle. Piper looked at her perfect reflection in the blade, but then the reflection changed. In the blade, she saw her dad in chains and surrounded in fire. At the same time, she heard an evil laugh, the same laughter as in her dreams. Piper? Annabeth called. You okay? Piper almost forgot she was even there, and the image in the blade disappeared. I'm okay. I just really like it, Piper lied. So, can I keep it? And, is there a phone I could use? I just want to call my dad. He's probably wondering where I am by now. Well, we try to avoid using phones for safety reasons, Annabeth explained. Using phones here is like attracting sharks with blood. In this case, it's like sending up a signal letting monsters know where you are. Long story. Of course, we should be safe within the camp's boundaries, but it's still risky. But yeah, I do have one. It'll be our little secret. Piper took the phone and dialed her dad's office number. Unfortunately, it was answered by his secretary, Jane. Mr. McLean's office, she answered. Jane, where's my dad? Piper rushed. Piper, are you not allowed to call from school? Where is he, Jane? Piper demanded. Out, Jane said. Jane, I haven't heard from him in weeks, Piper argued. What if something happened to... Piper, we're not going to turn this into a media circus, Jane said. I'm sure he's fine wherever he is. He does take off occasionally. He always comes back. So it's true, Piper said. You don't know. I have to go, Piper, Jane said, and just like that, she shut Piper up and hung up. Piper silently cursed herself and gave Annabeth back her phone. Your last name is McLean? Annabeth asked. Sorry, it's not my business, but that does sound familiar, though. Common name, Piper said. Yeah, I guess, Annabeth said. So what does your dad do? He's got a degree in the arts, Piper said, automatically. He's a Cherokee artist. Her standard response. Not a lie, just not the whole truth. Annabeth didn't look convinced, but she asked, You sure you're okay to keep going? Piper fastened her new dagger to her belt and promised herself that later, when she was alone, she'd figure out how it worked. Sure, I'm ready, she said. I want to see everything. Piper soon realized Annabeth's heart wasn't in the tour. She talked about all this amazing stuff the camp offered, magic archery, Pegasus riding, lava wall, fighting monsters, but she showed no excitement, as if her mind were elsewhere. She even pointed out how Camp Half-Blood was mostly a summer camp, but some kids stayed year-round, and they added so many campers, it was almost crowded now, even in winter. Piper wondered who ran the camp, and how they knew to come rescue her and her friends. She wondered if she had to stay there full-time, or if she'd be any good at the activities. Could you flunk out in monster fighting? A million questions bubbled in her head, but given Annabeth's moves, she decided to keep quiet. As they continued walking, Piper turned and got an amazing view of the layout of cabins. A bizarre assortment of buildings arranged around like a Greek omega, although there was a second section on the side with 8 more plain-looking cabins that looked pretty new. Piper counted 20 cabins in all. A blue one had a trident on it, another was black with a blood-red door, another was solid gold, another had a hammer on top, one glowed silver, another had a goblet on top, one had grass and trees growing on the roof. There was even a purple and pink one that looked like an ancient Greek dollhouse. Ugh, is that where supermodels go to die? Piper asked. Aphrodite cabin. Drew's place, Annabeth said. That figures, Piper said. Hey, don't worry, Annabeth said. Not all Aphrodite kids are like her. I've had a few friends from there over the years. I sure hope my mom's Athena, said Piper. Piper? I don't blame you, Annabeth smiled. Then Piper asked about the 2 bigger cabins at the end. Those are for Zeus and Hera. That's technically theirs since they're the king and queen of Olympus, Annabeth explained. Hera's cabin is just honorary, because she only has children with Zeus, so no demigods. Almost like Artemis, only she became an eternal maiden, which meant she can never date anyone, ever, and she leads a group of immortal female huntresses, and they never date anyone either. The cabin is used for whenever her hunters visit. Piper thought that sucked. From what she read about Artemis, she thought she'd make a great mom. And Zeus doesn't have that much children as well as the rest of the big 3, Annabeth said. Then she explained how the big 3, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, made an oath to never have children again since the 1940s, because their children were so powerful they brought greater danger. But Zeus and Poseidon didn't keep their promise. There is one daughter of Zeus named Thalia, who went to join Artemis. She's a good friend of mine. And my boyfriend, Percy, he's a son of Poseidon. He also has a half-brother named Tyson, who's also a son of Poseidon. There's also another boy named Nico, who's a son of Hades, but he was born before all that happened, and he's still alive. He was sort of pulled out of his own time period. Long story. Then, Piper noticed a bag laying on the side of the doorway of the Hera cabin. She started walking towards it. Piper, we really shouldn't be going into the empty cabins unless someone who lives in there invites us in, Annabeth said. For the sake of the gods' respect, you know. But somebody already stepped in, Piper said. Yeah, but... Piper walked in anyway, and thankfully, nothing happened. It was completely empty, except for the colored Hera statue in the middle of the room, and another girl in the corner who she didn't notice at first. It was a red-haired girl, dressed in a red hoodie and jeans with paint stains. Rachel! Annabeth said. They hugged each other, and Annabeth introduced Piper and Rachel to each other. Annabeth explained to Piper that Rachel was the camp's oracle. She was mortal, but then the spirit of Delphi had chosen Rachel as its new host, and she spoke prophecies in the oracle's voice from time to time. She was able to live her life, and go to school and do her own things sometimes. She always came to Camp Half-Blood every summer. Rachel mentioned she had no news on Percy's whereabouts, unfortunately. Piper kept looking around the room, mostly at the Hera statue and thinking about Percy's disappearance, and had the strangest feeling they were both connected somehow. Annabeth mentioned to Piper that about a month ago the entrance to Olympus was sealed off, and they had no connection to the Olympians. Everything just went silent, and no one knows why. Even my mom won't answer me, she said. And even our camp director, Mr. D, was recalled back to Olympus. Then Percy disappears, and later Hera sends me a message that I'll learn what happened to him by going to the Grand Canyon. Instead, I find you, Jason, and Leo. It doesn't make any sense. After hearing all that, Piper convinced herself to tell them what she knew. But before she could say anything, Rachel's body froze, and her eyes glowed like green lights. Green smoke poured from her mouth. She grasped Piper's shoulder so tight that Piper couldn't get free. Then, she spoke in an echoey voice that didn't really sound like her. Free me! Free me, Piper McLeod, or the earth shall swallow us all! This must be done by the solstice! After that, Rachel finally let go, but Piper fell flat on the floor, and everything in her sight went black.